Hi, Sign of the Month. This is one of my favorite Sign of the Months that we have done because I'm going to teach you another technique to color in your stencils after the outline. Not that you have to do it, we all can do our own spin on this, but it's one of my favorite techniques and I hope that you love it too. So spring is a lovely reminder of how beautiful change can truly be. And I liked it because it was a little different than just hello spring or something that you might already have. It's a beautiful quote that spring really is the start of new, and we hope that you love this sign as much as we do. So I'm going to go ahead and start out by just painting my background white. So we have white paint, and I'm just going to mash it into the board. You don't want to ever have too much shine on your board, so you really want to push it into the board so you don't have any of this type of gathering. If you do, just spread it out around. Now, if you are in our combo club or our Gotta Have It club, you'll notice that these flowers repeat in our banner. And obviously the Gotta Have It, you have a beautiful wood flower bouquet. So we've really tried to incorporate flowers of spring because I think there's just so much creativity we can do with that as artists and makers that you can each put your own hint on what you like for flowers. So all I'm doing here is just getting a good layer of white all over my project. And with white, it's a really light color, doesn't have a lot of primer. So I like to blow dry in between each layer. Giving a quick blow dry helps me from just spreading wet paint around the board for frustration. So just makes it go a little bit faster. Some of the darker colors you don't have to do that with. They have a little bit more primer, and so they cover just a little bit better. So you can choose if you want this to be a really solid look, or a lighter wash, doesn't really matter. It's completely up to your preference. I'm gonna go ahead and blow dry it and then give it one more layer just to make it not look streaky. And one more load, and you'll see that that really starts giving you a nice coverage. Most of the other colors you only need maybe one background color for, or two layers for. White's just a bit trickier because of its lack of primer. Wonderful. Go ahead and just wipe my hands down. Give it a quick blow dry one last time. All right, so once you have it nice and blow dried, when we paint, we raise the grain structure in a board. So we do need to sand it back down to make sure our stencil sticks with a nice smooth adhesion. So grab the piece of sandpaper and just give it a quick sand. Then you have the option, you can dry brush distress. You certainly don't have to, but I think it adds a little bit of shabby chic rusticness. So I'm gonna add just a touch of it. So I'm gonna grab my brush, I'm gonna use the gray and heavily, heavily unload on a paper towel. Then I'm just gonna start at the end and lightly pull back and forth in big, long, straight motions. To give my sign just a little bit of texture. I personally like a little bit of the shabby chic look. If you are not a fan, don't feel like you have to do this step. You can certainly leave it nice and bold and crisp and modern with just the white. I like to wear my edges just a little bit more. All right, so that gives me just a little bit of a shabby chic look, not much. Then I'm gonna flip my stencil over so the white part's facing up. Take that white and peel it back. Now this stencil has a lot of complex parts, so make sure that all of the blue stays down. So if something starts coming up like this, you're gonna push, sometimes it helps to crease, and peel back. And you're just gonna go back and forth, nice and slow, making sure all of the blue pieces stay down. Once you have it all peeled, go ahead and flip it over. I like to use it to line up and pull down slightly just so I know I'm nice and straight. Push down with your hand in a nice even motion. And then you're gonna use this clear spot and peel it back. Again, making sure that all of your blue pieces stay down. If they start popping up, just push them back forward. This part has a lot of moving pieces, so just be sure you're watching. Go slow, don't feel like you have to rush this part. Just a nice back and forth. The lower back, the steeper back you peel versus like lifting up, the more you'll have control to push back forward. Okay. So then you get to just start choosing your colors. Now, I'm gonna leave my flowers as a gray outline, except for the stems. Well, let me think about that. No, I'm actually gonna paint them. I changed my mind. That's part of the fun of crafting, right? I've been so excited to do this tutorial because there's so much you can do with these signs to express creativity that I literally was almost paralyzed by how many options I could do. So I'm gonna go ahead and do spring. Load, unload. You can. It's probably better to unload on a paper towel. I have bad habits. But make sure that you're always unloading so nothing is shiny over the stencil. So you want to build those layers nice and slowly. And use a different sponge for each color. So I'm just grabbing another piece of paper towel here so I can unload. I'm gonna use gray, dip, scrape, unload, hop, 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 hop. Dip, scrape, always unload on a paper towel just so you're not getting too much paint on your stencil right away. I'm just building those layers slowly so I don't have any heavy parts. If you get too much paint on top of that stencil, it only has one place to go, and that's underneath underneath your stencil. That creates a lot of bleeds. So don't do that. Now, I want to make my stems a little more green than this mint. So I'm actually going to just take that mint and a touch of the yellow and just blend them. And it'll just make a little bit more of a pale green. So I'm just doing the stem part. And then I'm going to come back through and do my flowers in whichever color I want them to be. So again, this is just the mint and the yellow blended. It just gave me a little bit more of a green. You could certainly do the mint color too, but I like mixing colors. Gives you a whole new palette to play with. Then you just choose. So I'm going to do a mint flower. And I love purple flowers. I'm not a big purple person, but for some reason I adore purple flowers. So I'm going to make both of these bigger flowers purple. So I'm always dipping, scraping, unloading on my paper towel, and then just hopping onto the stencil. And let's do those last two. Dip, scrape, unload. Make a little bit more of this green. If you find yourself needing a tighter area, you can always cut your sponge in half so you have a little bit more precision too. But over where I have my stencil, you can see I kind of use this as a palette, but wherever there's a gap in that stencil, I'm making sure it's not shiny at all because I don't want it to bleed underneath. I'm gonna go ahead and give everything just one more layer really quick. Because of the fact that I'm going to watercolor these, I do want to have a nice solid line that has a decent amount of paint, so that way I have kind of bumpers. So make sure you're really getting those areas in. And then do my pink. Get my mint one more time. So I'm loving the simplicity of this, but I'm gonna go ahead and add just a little bit of ombre to the top. So when I ombre, I did one quick layer of everything. I'm gonna go ahead and get a decent level of paint and go past that midpoint. So I'm going past where I think that blend is gonna happen. Okay? Then with that same sponge, I'm gonna use purple. Load, unload. You can use a different sponge too, it doesn't matter. Come from the bottom and work your way up. Now, as I get to this middle ground, I'm working with wet paint. My pushing of my sponge is lightening, so I'm tapping a little bit lighter to help create that blend. Now you can always go grab a little bit more mint, come back down, and soften that line until you like how it gradually fades. I think ombres and pastels in spring just seem to go together. So when I was making all those faces earlier in the video, it's because I was visualizing that idea. All right. Now, I do feel like my gray needs one more layer. Since I popped that sponge into the paint accidentally, I'm just gonna grab a new sponge. I could have cut the bottom of that off too. Load, unload. Make sure we're not getting too shiny with our paint. Okay? I'm gonna put all these sponges off to the side, and I'm gonna use my tweezers, and I'm gonna peel off the stencil. So the ombre is just ever so subtle. It's probably even hard to pick up on the camera, but I will hold this up. And then you'll see all of these petals come up, which is totally fine. You can leave it like that. But as we were doing this, I thought, how beautiful would it be if we can fill some of these voids in with a watercolor texture? Because I think of spring as just being soft and muted. Really pretty. So one time you'll see me kind of paint with more pastels. So all I'm doing is peeling up all my centers by kind of pushing them. If you don't have a tweezers at home, a safety pin works really well. Okay, so I'll hold this up now and then I'll show you what we're gonna do. You can kind of see that ombre. Okay, so now we're gonna just pencil these in with a little bit of water. Okay, so I have some water here. I have one little quick touch up where I went over, so I'm gonna do that with solid paint. And then I have one area that my A popped out, so I'm gonna go ahead and fix that as well. When you're doing touch-ups, just do the tiniest bit of paint. You really need hardly any. And it'll help your touch-up look more natural. Okay. So I'm gonna change my camera angle now so you guys can really see what I'm doing. A little bit better. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take my brush, water it down. It's still helpful to have a paper towel around, just to check that consistency. So I really want it quite watery here. And then I'm just gonna come in, and with doing it super watered down like this, you don't have to really stay as tight in the lines. Bluebird, sorry guys. It's okay, all things can be touched up. So by watering down your paint, it allows you to not have to stay precisely in the lines, because your edges are just going to blend into it. So I'm kind of checking my consistency on my paper towel, because I don't want this to be dark. I don't want it to be like actual paint, because it's not going to have that same look. So my brush is very, very watered down. Because then I can use the raised edges that are just slightly raised as almost like coloring book outlines, and give myself a nice look here. If you get too heavy, use your finger quickly to spread it out if it got with the wrong texture. But by doing this, you could add different gradients if you had other colors around. You could really have a lot of fun with this look of filling them in. So same thing with my pink. Water it down. Make sure I'm really watery. And then just come in and add some texture of petals. But make sure you have a good bit of water so you're not losing those lines. And don't be afraid to finger paint in here if you get a little heavy. So you want to keep it nice and light so those lines still show. So it's kind of like Karate Kid. If you get too heavy, wax on, wax off. Okay? Let's go ahead and go for another one. Gonna load. You could have a different paintbrush for, or dip water for each color too, if you don't want to have that blend. But you really need hardly any paint, mostly water, and don't be afraid to blend. If you go out of the lines, don't stress. Usually because it's so watery, you can catch it with your fingers, but you can always come in and do touch-ups with a dry brush too, okay? Let's get that purple and then we'll do some green. And our sign will be complete. So I'm still kind of drying my brush off on the paper towel just so I don't get too heavy, because I really want those lines to still show. So you can really go in and add a ton of different textures. It's gonna pick up some of your brush movements depending on how much paint you have on here. But what I love about this watercolor technique is you don't have to be super precise. It's not truly freehanding. You're just kind of gently adding shade, as long as you stay pretty watery. And once you get some water on that board, you can really kind of use that to spread around. The more water you use, the lighter that shade's gonna be. So sometimes, if I feel like I'm struggling, I'll even add water to the board first and then just add a touch of paint to my paintbrush. So my water is picking up a little bit of that pink, which I actually really like. And then let's go ahead and add some yellow where those centers are. Because if you did our Gotta Have It tutorial, this is gonna emulate that one flower that I painted, which really helps start to tie your three components together. When we design these boxes, we really want it to be a vignette that you can really display together. So if you are a Gotta Have It member, everything's gonna kind of integrate together. Okay. And then I'm just gonna make that green again. A little side thing here. Doesn't have to be the exact same shade because we're gonna water it down so much. I'm gonna get some fresh water here. It does not have to be bottled water. But I really like this because you can add so much different shades and textures. So have some fun with it. The more watered down you go, the more forgiveness you have. So and voila. You have a beautiful sign that's partially hand painted and stenciled, and a gorgeous reminder that change can be good. So we can't wait to see what you do with this. There's so many ways you can take this, from classic simple to you could even do it all gray and then just have a pop of color with your insides. So So many creative things to do. I can't wait to see yours. Don't forget to share it and hashtag PGM MakerBox. Thank you. Hello, MakerBox members. I have to admit, this is one of the most laser intensive projects that we have ever given, and it definitely took so many hours to cut, but we hope that you love it and the versatility of it, because the intricacy makes it a stunning project and beautiful, and there are so many ways you can do this. So the letters fit on the big scalloped designs for your banner, and the little guys fit here. Now, you can make this one ginormous banner and rotate them in and out, or you could make this 2 separate banners and be able to decorate 2 spaces in your house. So the possibilities are absolutely endless. You could do buffalo plaid on one side, you could paint these all different colors and rotate, you could paint them tie-dye, you could watercolor them, you could do so many things. So we can't wait to see what you do with these projects, because there's no rules. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I like to do, I went ahead and painted all of these white already, but if you are first and new to our MakerBox members, I'm also gonna show you how to paint white on the background of this base, because I just didn't want you guys to watch me paint white forever. So in addition to the banner, you have this stand-up bunny. So he's gonna go into this base and stand up and be another vignette that you can display with your banners. So we hope that you love this. So let's go ahead and get started with how you're gonna paint your backgrounds, because I got a head start. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna use your yellow sponge, and we wanna remember a little bit of paint goes a really long way. So you're gonna dip it into whatever color you choose to do your backgrounds in, and mash that onto the board. Now you really do want to make sure that you're pushing it into the wood, because if you just let it sit on top, it has a really funky texture and it just doesn't work as well. So mash it into the wood and build those layers slowly. You don't want to have to sand it all off later because it gets chunky. So dip, scrape, mash it on. And if you're struggling to get the white to cover, one of my best tips is to blow dry in between layers, because it just really helps so you're not pushing wet paint around the board. So that gives you layer number 1. We'll go ahead and add another layer in just a little bit after it dries. I went ahead and painted both sides of mine just white. Again, you don't have to paint them white. The possibilities are endless for colors. I just want to teach you how to do it, and then let your creativity run wild. All right, here we go. So when we're doing all of these laser work pieces, one of my worst things is chasing them around. So I love to just grab a piece of painter's tape, roll the edges, and just go ahead and stick it down. Now there's a lot of different components here, so I'm gonna go ahead and just give myself 2, so I can paint everything how I want it. Now, it does take a little bit of planning, and you might play around with how you're gonna sort out your letters. But what all of these letters spell is Easter and spring. So I would go ahead and lay them out so you know what letters go with what design. Otherwise, you might mix yourself completely up. And lay them out in order, so if you're wanting to make a pattern with your letters, you have that option. All right, then you have all of these little guys. We have our flowers for the spring side and our shapes for the second side. Now I'm gonna let all of my flowers hook up because they don't fit straight. I want them to look like they're growing into it. So I'm laying them all so they curve up like this, and that's how I'm gonna paint them. You could do it whichever way you choose, okay? I actually need one more thing of tape because I have so many laser pieces here. This is gonna be a stunning banner when we're done. or 2 banners if you choose to split it up. All right, so I'm gonna choose to have my ducks and my bunnies facing each other. So I'm gonna use one positive side and one negative side. So I wanna make sure when I paint those that they're facing that way. So he's gonna look like they're kissing, and then I have my egg for the middle. And you actually will end up with one extra flower that you can hang somewhere else. We just, in case you decided to switch that stuff up, we just gave you extras. So I have my little flowers down here. All right, and then we're just gonna go ahead and get painting. So you have your white sponges, and this is the part we do wanna remember, a little bit of paint goes a really long way. You could have a lot of fun with these. You can rotate colors, you could do ombres. There is so many options. But I'm gonna go ahead and start with, at an impasse, I don't know. There's so much fun to be had. Let's move you up a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and make my egg my favorite color, mint. So with all these intricate things, you do wanna make sure you're not going too heavy on your paint. Otherwise it's gonna kind of goop in the middle. So I still like to keep a paper towel and unload. And just like when we're stenciling, if you've painted with us before, just lightly dab a layer of paint on there so you're not getting it all into the sides and edges. So dip, scrape. All right, and I personally believe chicks should be white, or yellow, sorry, so I'm gonna go ahead and dip, scrape, and paint my chicks yellow with that same process. We included a lot of spring pastels, but if you have extra paint laying at home from acrylic paint or your craft store or anything, it will all work on these, especially since we're not stenciling, we're just piecing lasers. Really any paint that you have will work. So feel free to explore your color palettes to match your household. And we wanted to include some nice springtime colors because we don't play with our pastels a whole lot in the studio. And I'm gonna do some purple bunnies, I think. This is one of those projects, because of the creativity that you can spin with this and whether you decorate it with 1 or 2 banners or however you choose. There's so many configurations. I cannot wait to watch what you guys do for displaying this. But do build those layers slowly so you don't get too much paint in all of the fine details. It'll just make it look more ornate and intricate, which I personally love. I'm gonna go ahead and do my bunny bow in purple to match my bunnies here. And then if you want to make a green, because we can only put so much paint in here or we run out of space in our bags. So what I like to do is take a little bit of that mint and some of the yellow, mix it together, and it gives you a really pretty pastel green. And that's what I'm gonna use to paint these leaves. So that bow is gonna cover up the spot there, so you don't have to really worry about being too detailed or covering it all, but we'll just give it a nice solid coat. And while I have that green made, I'm gonna go ahead and do the stems of my flowers. This is where you might find the little touch-up brush that's included in your set is helpful. For the stems that the flowers do come down. I'm running out of table space. I'm just gonna scoot myself up here. There we go. So I'm just giving everything a nice light layer, and then I'll come through and do some second layers. Again, I'm just going to mix up a little bit of that green. You could do it on a paper plate, or I do it right on my napkin. Using the side of my sponge for those tight areas, but the little touch-up brush could work just as well. And I'm not being too concerned if I go over, because I can just come up and touch it up when I start adding my flower details. I'm getting excited to see my final product. All right, so let's have some fun with the rest of these colors. So this flower really looks like a daisy to me. So I'm gonna do typical white and yellow. So I'll start my layer of white, and then I can come in and add that yellow. And personally, because I know I'm gonna have one extra flower, the daisy is one that I'm gonna use on the free floating one and be able to paint that a different color, so that way my white shows up. If you're gonna leave it on a white background, just know that it's not gonna stand out very pronounced because it's on a white background. All right, and then I'm gonna go ahead and grab one of my little brushes for some of these tighter details. So I'm gonna take that green that I made and just fine tune anywhere that I went over, because it's hard to get with a brush. But I don't wanna do the whole thing with this, because A, I feel like it would take me a really long time, and B, it doesn't give the same finish. So I still like getting the primary part of my painting done with the sponge, and then just adding details with my brush, okay? All right, let's get some pink flowers going. This one looks like a rose. I'm really bad with flowers, so I'm probably messing my names for these up. But as long as you make them pretty, They can be whatever flower you want them to be. And again, keep that green handy because you'll end up kind of going over it a couple of times. I personally just really love the color green that these two colors mix too. So that's why we included that. It's kind of fun to just sit and pick colors for flowers. You get to kind of be the gardener. You could do them all the same. You can vary them up. There's no rules. It's the biggest thing to remember, no rules. Let's go ahead and do some purple flowers because that's my favorite. I love purple flowers. I feel like we need a yellow flower too. I'm going to use my paintbrush to get this yellow circle for my daisies. I personally love spring, especially after a cold winter. I grew up in Wisconsin, so there's just something so fresh and exciting when the weather changes and makes it all pretty again. And it's one of the holidays that I feel like everyone's kind of excited to decorate for, but then it creeps up so fast. And this year, Easter is late if you celebrate Easter. And so that way, this sign would allow you to just flip it over for Easter, but you can use spring a lot longer, because hopefully, depending where you are, you're starting to get some spring weather. All right, we got some of those filled in. And now we just have to choose what we're gonna do with our letters. So we can leave them plain and simple, or we could do an ombre. I think I'm gonna do spring nice and simple because I want my flowers to do the talking. And then Easter, I think I'll have a little bit of fun with. So because I'm doing that, I'm gonna scoot these over so I don't mess up my spring. And I'm gonna do them pink because I love this pressed flower color. So again, just loading and unloading. You can really start seeing everything kind of come together here. And how it's going to start coordinating. And then Easter, I love me some mint. So I'm going to go ahead and paint the mint, but then I'll add a little bit of purple ombre. So I'm going to get a nice layer of mint going on everything first. All right, now that I have a nice layer of my solid color, I'm gonna bring in some purple. I'm gonna start on the bottom, and as I get towards the middle, I'm just lightening my touch. So I'm starting out pretty firm with my touch on the bottom. Again, I have a nice solid layer of the one color, so I have something to work with. And then as I get towards that middle, just past it, I'm just kind of tickling lightly with this sponge. And then you can come back with your teal sponge and do the same thing. You're just gonna lighten your touch as you get towards that middle. So you create a nice gradient ombre. You could also do two-tone, but I like to kind of have that fade, so you're kind of creating that third color. It's looking a lot of fun. All right, so I'm gonna take this stuff and put it to the side a little bit. Switch you up, okay? And then I get to kind of determine what I want to do with everything else and how I want to piece it together. So I'm going to give my bunny base one more coat of white here. Okay. And then I love my shiplap bunny, but I'm going to add a little bit of distressing to him. So I'm going to use my dry brush distress technique. I'm going to dip my paintbrush in there, grab another paper towel, and I'm going to unload very heavily. Then I'm going to follow the lines of this palette and just give it a little bit of distressing. So I'll give an overall distress to everything. And then I'm just going to go where those lines are, just a little bit heavier. And that's going to accentuate the bunny there. Then you have your sandpaper in your kit. I have a sanding block, so if you are going to buy a lot of sand maker kits, sometimes this is a little easier. Just going to give it a light sand so I can smooth everything out. And you can play with how much you want to do that, but it just kind of gives it a little bit more depth, okay? Then I can take my glue pot. I'm running out of room. My glue fell over. And I like to use the brush that came in it just so I don't get too thick. Go ahead and add glue to your base. We make the base 2 layers thick so it has a little bit more durability to stand up. I'm gonna line those 2 things up so the hole is open. Go ahead and let that dry. And then I'm gonna glue on his garland here. Just line it up with the outline. And now it's time for his bow. Or maybe, it's a bow tie. We'll make it a him. You can make it whatever you want to make it. Careful not to get too much paint on the edge or glue on the edges so it doesn't spill over. Then we're gonna add bow tie, and go ahead and let everything set up before you try and stack them. So we'll put him off to the side as well. Now I'm really liking this light distressing, so I'm going to do that on all of my pieces as well. Again, you could do buffalo plaid, you could do anything that you choose to add some texture, but I like a little bit of that rustic look. I'm just going to take the pieces that I painted white, load, unload, and then just really lightly tickle back and forth, back and forth. It's going to just give it a little bit more texture than just a stark white. And I'm going to do both sides. I cannot wait to see how each of you take your spin with this. I really can't. I know I keep saying that, but I do hope you'll share pictures. So I'm just giving everything its little light distressing here. And then I'm going to go through and sand it so it adds a touch of blending as well. If you get too heavy, don't freak out. You can always sand it down or distress with your background color. So if there's a spot that's too heavy, go ahead and get a brush with white on it, and then just distress back over it with your distressing colors. Almost there. Okay, and then I like that look of making it all look cohesive, so I'm going to do the same thing on my banners that my shapes are going to fit on. You could do a color rotation. You could do ombres on these and then white colors for your words. There is so many options. I literally struggled to start this tutorial because I had so many ways to paint this, I couldn't decide how I wanted to. You could even Mod Podge scrapbook paper on these and create different scenes if you happen to have some, if you're a crafter trying to find some ways to use that. Now we're pretty much to the fun part where we get to put everything together. So again, I'm going to take my sanding block and just kind of smooth things out. Okay, now here is the important part. If you are stringing this as one banner and it's reversible, you need to make sure you coordinate how you glue things on, okay? So my best advice to not confuse yourself is to glue all one side on, go ahead and weave it together, and then we're gonna glue the other side on. So I'm gonna go ahead and map it out like it's one project, okay? So give me just a second, and I'm gonna clear my space, and I'll be right back. All right, we're ready to start putting things together. So the first thing that I do is the letters are gonna fit on the big ones. So I'm gonna lay all 6 of those out because I will need every last one. Okay? And then the in-betweens, you really only need 5 of. So we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this guy is extra, and we gave you an extra flower so you can use it as a little door pendant. So I'm gonna put him to the side. Now, I want to limit it on space so you guys can see me here. So what I'm gonna do, just for sake of space, is go ahead and do this. And I'm gonna start with my Easter, because to me, I need to make sure they face. So I'm gonna take all my Easter components, make sure you spell right, okay? And you will use the glue and the little brush that comes in here. You'll just add a line of glue, just so I can make sure not to use too much of your time. I use super glue, which works as well. I like to put a little bit of glue on, and then I dab it off to the side, just so it kind of stops any pushing out off the sides. And then I place it onto my banner. Okay? So always kind of dab it off just so you don't push a bunch out. So you don't want your pretty background to be all gluey. I get quiet because I want to make sure I line everything up right. Okay, so as you can see, this guy here is going to be our middle point. So that's where I'm going to put my egg. My egg part over here. Okay, so I'm going to use this intricate egg. And just use your paintbrush, your little mini paintbrush, to add glue on all the big pieces you can, and then please on these especially, make sure you dab off so you don't get too much glue in the middle. Line him up. Then I'm going to do my bunnies off to the side. You can also just make like a pile of glue and rub it in it. Sometimes that's easier too. And I'm just gluing everything down. should just have a pile of glue here. Sometimes with these intricate ones, that's just the easiest. All right, so I have everything laid out. Now I can flip it over very carefully so I line everything up right when it's going the opposite way. I'm gonna not move a single thing out of order. Wait, I just caught myself. Because when we rotate it around, it's gonna flip. So before I do that, here's my advice. Warning, warning, I got ahead of myself. We're actually gonna string it, like I said, so that way we don't make a mistake. And we can visualize this completely. So when I string things, I like to grab just a little piece of tape. That way I'm almost making a needle with it. And I'm gonna go up and through. And then just rotate. Like I said, this is a very long banner, kind of designed for like a big 6-foot mantle or a wall. So if you don't have that big a space, you could do them as separate little banners, and that would be really cute too. Okay. Up and down, and then just feed it through. I find with anything reversible, putting it together first before you do the reverse side is always better. I do also find that it's important to do this side first because the flower is a little taller and we're gonna want all of the height. So that way these guys are blank on the back when we get to that section. Okay, so now, I don't even think my arms are long enough. We have your sign. Then when you lay it down in its opposite format, that's how you'll know how to put spring on, okay? So I'm gonna flip it all over. And again, for spring, we want the rope to be not coming over the top of the loops, if that makes sense. And you'll see why in just a second. All right, so I'm gonna start with S. gonna lay out my letters. And then these flowers are gonna angle off to the side, like they're coming up. So they're not straight on. They're kind of growing into the design there. And I really do like to lay everything out first, because like here, I don't want two purples together. So I'm gonna flip-flop that. I don't want two pinks together, so I'll flip-flop that, okay? So lay it all out first, and then start having fun gluing this. End up with any random big glue spots, make sure you're kind of getting it before you put it on there, because it's really hard to touch up otherwise. And since you probably have more space to spread out, I would make this all one big spread out gloriousness. I'm just trying to keep it all within the camera angle here, so you can see it. Especially with the flowers, always dab off. Just like we did those intricate designs, because we don't want it to bleed over. So I'm just loading the flower and kind of dabbing it off. Almost there. All right, and like we said, we're gonna have one extra of these. So you can paint it a different color if you want, or you can keep it simple, and we're just gonna make a single little door hanger of it. So to me, because I did a solid color on that, or white, I'm gonna come through and actually paint this one a gray. Blow dry it. And then I can glue this on here, and it'll just be a little bit different. I can hang it on a door, or even give it as a little gift to somebody. Okay? So you will have extra twine, which is designed that way. And we're just going to snip off a portion that we don't need. And we'll use that same twine. And I'll tie a knot here in the front. I don't want this super long. So then you have a little extra door hanger, like literally hang it on a door. And we're just gonna do the same thing to knot our edges here. You can decide if you wanna put a loop or a knot. And how much slack you want to put in between each letter is all up to you. I would just position it out based on where you're going to hang it. Excuse me. And you have your Happy Easter that flips over to Happy Spring. So super cute banner there. But we're not done yet. Remember, we have our banner here, which is huge. Put that to the side. We have our temp banner, but we can't forget about our adorable little bunny who is over here drying. He even has these little flowers you can paint and glue on however you'd like. So you can just add little touches of flowers if you want to him. There's no particular place they have to go. Just adds a level of cuteness. You don't have to use them all. And then he just slides right in his hole. And you have a stand-up bunny along with your banner to enjoy a whole lot of fun. Thank you. Hey Gotta Have It members, this is your special feature project. So we sourced these boots from another local company and I think they're so stinking adorable and totally reminded me of spring. And then you will see you have all of these flowers and some greenery and some wire and this little tube of glycerin. And then in your kit you have some glue as well. So what are we gonna do with all this? Well, we're gonna make our own featured bouquet. Now, before we get started on our boot, I like to do my flowers first because they take a little bit to dry and you don't wanna rush the process because you'll get some bleeding on them. So how do you do these flowers? Well, this little container has glycerin in it. That's gonna help our wood flowers stay a little softer and not get too crunchy as they dry. So I'm gonna dump that whole thing of glycerin in a container, and then I'm gonna fill with water. Now, you can use the little brushes we include, or if you have a bigger brush, it can make it go a little bit faster. So I'm just gonna mix that glycerin and water up. And then I wanna coat my flowers so they're nice and moist. So you could use a bigger container as well. I like to just use these portion cups because I have them at the studio, but if you had a bowl, that might be a little easier. So we're gonna soak them. Oh, I made a mess. So they're nice and wet. Now, because we've got them nice and wet, we can then use paint and kind of water it down. So I have a little extra thing to rinse my brush in. And I'm gonna use some pink and just paint the flower how you want. Now you can add multicolored textures to these. You could add a whole bunch of different colors if you have some, but you don't want to get your paint too chunky. So you want it almost like a dye. So I just pulled off a little bit of my glycerin concoction in a smaller container here, but I still have most of it in there. So I dipped the whole flower first, but I like to wet my brush in it too. And that way, if your paint gets a little too heavy, you can soften it up again. And they take a little bit of time. You can have a lot of fun with these flowers, but definitely, like I said, start your project by painting these because they do take the longest to dry. I'm gonna grab a paper towel. Just to be able to clean my brush. I'm gonna put a little bit of yellow on the inside of that flower. So I can get another little container, pour a little bit into it. You can make these all look like succulents if you have greens at home. There are so many creative ways. So if you're getting a little stuck and you don't per se like the way I'm doing it, if it doesn't fit your decor, check out Pinterest and just search Sola flowers or wood flowers and you'll get a whole bunch of ideas. But you can see that just kind of adds a nice touch. I'm gonna just put it off to the side to dry. Let's see. I got lots of little ones here. I'm still gonna do this one as a pink one. I'll go ahead and dunk it. Get it nice and coated with my glycerin. So a bigger bowl would be a little easier. I just didn't have one at the shop, so. And just paint your watered down paint on here like you're dyeing it. And these do just take a little bit of playing with, so be gentle, move slow, because they do tear. But they are actually, I believe, from the tapioca plant, so they're wood, so you can have a little bit of fun with them. And it's a way to have flowers last for you, so you get to paint. So we thought this would be a fun way to involve another company, because we certainly do not make these flowers, but we were able to wholesale with them so we could bring them to you as a fun project. You can see it just turns out really pretty, so I'm going to put that to the side. And then I'm going to have a little bit of fun with my other ones here. So we all know I love teal. If you've watched our videos at all, I'm a huge teal fan. I'm going to dip these little guys. They fit in my little concoction just fine. But don't be afraid to play with some ombres and different colors on these. I'm going kind of simple just to keep it fun, but the more watery your brush is, the easier it's not going to clump up and you'll be able to spread that paint around. So I just kind of almost use it like watercolors. That's my biggest trick to these. And always make sure you have that glycerin mixed into your water. Okay, a little bit of a teal one there. Let's see. I'm Might as well just use all the colors, right? Let's dip this guy. Get him nice and wet. And then I think I'll make him my purple flower. I don't know why they're boys. But we hope that our Gotta Have It members love this box. We really tried to make every component work well together so you can display it all on a mantle or a sofa table. It's a very cohesive collection, really stemming around those flowers and spring. And then I think I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow again. So I'm just cleaning my brush, wetting down my yellow. I got a little heavy there, so I'm just gonna water my paint down again so it doesn't clump up. Got my purple one. And then let's go ahead and do this as an all yellow rose. So I'm gonna wet it. Get that yellow paint. Make this a rose of friendship. We are very excited. We have our next box is gonna be awesome as well. We had so much fun planning it. It's very summer, but yet you can use it all year long. Whoop. And see, I can't give a whole lot of other hints about it yet, but I think it's gonna be one of my favorite boxes. This is a very in full box as well. So we've been able to plan our boxes for the whole year already, which is allowing us to really add a lot of different details to the projects. So we hope you love it. Here's my little yellow rose. All right, so I'm gonna put those to the side and let them dry. It means I'm done with my glycerin. I'm just gonna put my other paints over here so I can use them. And dry up my mess here. So one thing about crafting is it's always messy, right? Okay, so then you have this boot. Now we put a styrofoam in the boot, and that's gonna help us arrange our flowers. So you could paint the inside of your boot. I don't really plan to because I'm gonna fill it with flowers, so that's up to you. Now because I did such a colorful display, I'm actually gonna do a gray rain boot, but I think this gray is a little too dark for what I want to do, so I'm just gonna mix it. And I'm gonna mix it right on my lid here. But you could do whatever color, and I literally hope that you will all share your pictures with us because I want to see the creativity here. This is one of those projects that is just so wide open to creativity that I know you guys are gonna do an amazing job with it. So to do ceramics, I like to use the yellow sponge. It just seems to work the fastest and most consistent. And I'm just gonna paint the primary part of my boot all gray first. And then I'll come through and add some details. It honestly would be really cute left white. I don't think you can go wrong. You could add polka dots, you could add zigzags. We sell some really cute little garden stakes you could add in it that say like not dead yet. It's not gonna die because they're fake. It's my favorite kind of flower that I can keep alive. All of you that have a green thumb, I am envious of you. It is not my specialty, although I am trying to learn. We're trying to plant a bunch of stuff. All right, so I'm just gonna mix some more of my lighter gray color here. And I like mixing paint because It adds a little bit of texture to the color too. And I like this a little better, it lightened it up. So I'm just trying to get it nice and even. The bisque is really forgiving, so if you paint something one color and you decide you don't like it, please do not stress, just blow dry it and then come back through and paint it the color that you want. You can put so many layers of paint on these and keep changing it until you love it, so there is no harm, no foul in being experimenting and having fun with this project. I just want to make sure it's nice and smooth. Okay. So you have your gray boot. And like I said, you could add some details. We could add like a yellow on the bottom, but I'm gonna just keep it simple because I'm a big fan of simple. So I'm gonna let that dry. Now you have the option, we did include glaze in your kit. If you want it to be a little shinier or a little more protected, just blow dry it really good and then do a light layer of glaze over the top and it's gonna keep it a little more sealed. I like the matte look for this particular one, so I'm gonna leave it matte, but we wanted you to have the option. So both are completely acceptable, but that's what that glaze is for. So, and your glaze is in a bigger container. That's how you tell the glycerin and the glaze apart. So our next step is we're gonna use our floral wire. I like to dip a little bit of glue on it before I carefully jab it in there. To make sure your fingers are clean, I just gomered on mine a little bit. So we're just gonna add a touch of glue and then get our stems poked in. Let me clean my hands. And you have lots of projects to work on, so if your flowers need more time to dry, I'm kind of rushing this for the video purposes, but do not feel like you have to rush this. It's great to leave the flowers dry, then you're not gonna be fingerprinting them as much. But I'm just finding kind of the weak point in the flower and gently working the wire in there. The glue is gonna help it stick so you have a little bit more control when we go to arrange them. And because it's wood glue, the wood glue works really well. And you'll find little spots on your flower that maybe didn't dry as dark as you want. So you can come in and add some more, or some people like to do the tips of their roses in a darker color. The sky is the limit, okay? So once you have all of your flowers there, you're gonna let them set up for just a little bit and dry. And that way they're a little bit more firm when you go to arrange them. But here, I do like to kind of start with the bigger flowers. I'm just gonna poke it in. Try and vary up your colors so you don't have maybe two pinks right next to each other or anything like that. And try and remember to look at things from all angles so it looks pretty from all directions. I like to keep the flowers towards the center and push down fairly low. So that way I can just tuck my greenery in around it. once you have it arranged the way you like it, you can pull that greenery apart, you can keep it together, you can wrap it around. It's just a great little way to kind of hide the top of the boot and add a little extra touch. And there you have it, a little rain boot floral bouquet that you can use from year to year. Close up my glue. What do you think? I cannot wait to see yours. I'm sure some of you are going to do some really amazing things with your boot painting and your flower display. Thank you, Gotta Have It members.